again, everybody. Welcome into Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And we continue our nostalgic tour through the musical year of 1981. If you are relatively new to us, Sheryl and I used to work at a store called Silver Platters. She and her husband Mike now own that record store chain in the Puget Sound area. It used to be only CDs back
Actually,
in the
I think it
80s
owns
and 90s.
us.
Yeah. Sheryl and I are bonkers music fans from a young age, and we are. This is a little exercise in nostalgia. We're putting together, We're curating a playlist, starting with our earliest music memories, peaking in our high school years, and then tapering off in the young adulthood. We have not yet reached our high school years, so we are still on the incline. We are picking a whole bunch of songs from 1981. We started in 1972 with Don McLean's American Pie, then 2 songs the next year, 2 more songs the year after that, adding 2 as we go along. So what are we at? We're doing 18 now? 20? I've already forgotten. 18.
I don't know, but it seems like a really large number, but it's not enough, which is weird.
Especially for this year, because there are so many great singles this year. So we are curating the playlist. All the songs we are adding to the playlist, you can access it yourself on Spotify. And how do they find that on Spotify, Sheryl? You're the Spotify person.
Oh, well, they could just type in GenExcellent and it would come up, or they could type in Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist and they will find the playlist on Spotify.
You know, I found this works a dream. If you want to share our podcast, or if you want other people to join us, just tell them to Google GenExcellent. Put GEN in front of the word excellent. First thing on your list. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how nobody's used that word before in a marketing context. It's just boggles the mind. But apparently we've got,
especially
we should copyright that.
Yes, I think so. I think it's time to do that.
Maybe we should look into that. So anyway, so 1981. So we're just to get caught up on what we've done already for the year 1981. We started talking about the death of John Lennon. We added Watching the Wheels and the goofy medley of Beatles hits and other songs by Stars on 45 that was a worldwide smash in early 1981. We did a special episode about the emergence of rap music and added Blondie's Rapture to our playlist. Had a couple of guests who added songs to the list as well. Steve Winwood's Why You See a Chance, 45's been in my collection forever. The Who's You Better You Bet. It's about an umpteenth Who song that Sheryl. Let's see, you've had three albums or 2, just 2.
2 albums and Pete's solo album.
All right, yes, Empty Glass, of course.
Yeah, and you know, I can't say that I'm done because I
2
could
really good songs on It's Hard.
Off It's Hard. Yeah.
The album is kind of a stinker, but the singles were great. No question about that. We talked a lot about Jesse's Girl, I think, in our last show. We didn't add it to the playlist. It's just kind of on the margins
right on
there.
the cusp.
Right on the cusp. That's very well put. Sheryl had Too Much Time on My Hands from Styx, Tommy Shaw's highest charting single with the band. And then the second album from High Infidelity, we had Keep On Loving You from 1980. And then Take It on the Run, which was a single release in 1981. So that's some of the stuff that we have done so far. Now, we ran out of time on our last episode. We were going to talk about a band and a song that we teased many, many episodes ago back in 1970. What was it, 76? I've already forgotten. What year did...
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The band Climax Blues Band, and I made a claim that they are one of the greatest 2-hit wonder bands of all time, and I was pretty sure their second hit would make the list, and lo and behold, there it is, one of Matt's selections.
And actually, the first one was my choice, and this one is your choice.
Right. And, you know, I keep rehashing this, but we're doing this out of love for talking about music and sharing our love with others. But the residual effects are manifold and pleasing. And one of those effects has been discovery of new music. Another effect is rediscovery of great music we'd forgotten about or not listened to for a long time. Um, I'm a big fan of the Climax Blues Band. I think I haven't listened to their albums, and I have the feeling what I'm going to find is that they are best experienced. They're great live, just a great live band. And once you get into the mid '70s, going into the '80s, it's kind of the classic lineup with oh God, now I'm drawing the great
Pete
drummer.
Haycock.
Pete Haycock's the guitarist.
Mhm.
And then you've got Colin Cooper, who is the horn player and the deep, raspy, lovely, sexy baritone voice, the guy with the long hair and the aviator shades.
The one who sang lead on Couldn't Get It Right.
Yes. He doesn't sing a whole lot of leads, but that was the
No.
one that was a hit. John Holt is the bassist, Derek Holt, excuse me, and he is responsible for this song, I Love You. And then I think John Cuffley is it Cuffley? I'm drawing a blank on the. He's a great
You're
drummer.
the name person. I don't know anybody's name.
I know. He is so good. The rhythm section is great in this band. It's what I really enjoy about them, especially live. They really get cooking, and they're versatile. They can play a number of styles. But this song, if you got into Climax Blues Band in the early days when they were more of a hard rockin' straight blues band, kind of in the Fleetwood Mac mode. Their first album came out in '69, and they, at that time, they were the Climax Chicago Blues Band. They eventually dropped the Chicago, and then after some lineup changes, they had settled on this quartet, and then the gold-plated album comes out in the mid-'70s with Couldn't Get It Right, top 10 hit in the USA. Prior to that release, they had a live album called FM Live, a double live. Every rock band put out a double live album in the '70s.
Yeah.
And a lot of them sold really well, so you can see why they did it. But that was really what got the first album that sold significantly, I think, in the USA was the FM Live album, which was basically what it says, a recording of a live concert that was broadcast in New York City on FM radio. So they're a hard touring band. And they really started focusing on the United States and were getting a foothold, getting bigger and bigger crowds, playing bigger arenas, going from opening for big acts to headliners. And now they're playing pretty sizable arenas and stuff, even though they're not churning out a bunch of top 40 hits, just the one. This song, though, is pretty atypical of the band sound, and it was somewhat divisive. I guess somewhat is not the right word to use. It was very divisive. In fact, the band kind of unraveled after this song became a hit in 1981. It's a melodic, soft rock, straight love song that the bassist Derek Holt wrote about the gal that would be his, I believe, second wife. And it's pretty autobiographical. It's very sincere. Some might say a little corny,
Cheesy?
a little cheesy, a little corny, but I think in a good way.
It's endearing, though. I like that.
It is. It's very sincere. It's got a great melody. It's got a McCartney-esque melody, I would think, particularly the chorus. And then aspects of it also remind me of Badfinger, particularly the slide guitar solo, which is very reminiscent of the famous slide guitar solo in Day After Day, performed by Pete Ham and actually doubled by George Harrison, who was the producer on that. Which I think is interesting because Badfinger also significantly put out an album in 1981 on a small label. It came out in January that year, and it would be their last album. And when I say they, this iteration of Badfinger does not include Pete Ham because he sadly committed suicide in 1975. Badfinger is an incredible group, and one of the groups I'm most obsessed with at this point in my life. When I go to a record store, I've got a list of things I'm looking for, and in whatever limited amount of time I have, I'm going to look for these things first, and if there's any time left over, I'll thumb around a bit. First thing I look for is Badfinger, because their CDs are hard to find. All their studio albums have been out of print on CD for a while, and some of them are exceedingly difficult to come across. Thankfully, I did find a copy of their final album, Say No More. So at this point, it's Tom Evans, the bass player, and Joey Molland, the second guitarist, the core of this version of Badfinger. What makes this album significant, other than being their final release, is the keyboard player on this record, which I didn't know about until I got the record. And it's Tony Kaye of Yes. And this is right before he goes, Yes reforms for the 90125 album. This was his gig right before that. So Badfinger hired him as a touring keyboardist when they were touring their previous album, Airwaves, which came out in 79, I think. That's the one I have not tracked down yet on CD. So he tours with them on that, and then they bring him back for the studio recording of Say No More. And then he's touring with them after that as well in 81 before he gets the call to rejoin Yes. It's, it's not one of their great albums, obviously. I mean, none of the albums without Pete Ham are going to be most Badfinger fans' favorites. But I think it's still a very worthy listen. I liked it start to finish. It is a little. There's no song that jumps out. There's no.
There's no single. I don't hear a single.
No,
but
no. But
it's not bad though. I think it's fine mostly. But then it actually kind of started growing on me a little bit more. And there's some cool piano in there, like keyboards, not like synth, but like keyboards. The
keyboards become more prominent as the album goes along. So side 2 is really more of a showcase for Tony Kaye, and it's more the 80s sound creeping in later on the album. Earlier on, they're showing off their rock and boogie chops. And a lot of people think of Badfinger as the prototypical power pop band, as a melodic rock band. These guys could rock, though. I mean, there's just a wealth of incredible vintage footage of Badfinger from their glory years, the early 70s. And these guys could jam with the best of them. With the two guitars, Pete Ham and Joey Molland, solid rhythm section with Tom Evans and Mike Gibbons on the drums. They do some extended rock stuff on live on television in 70 and 71. That's really reminiscent of the Peter Green, Danny Kirwan, Fleetwood Mac of the same era. I mean, it's same quality. I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, it's not what most people love about Badfinger, but it's just another arrow in their quiver. It was a very talented band. I think very underrated musically as far as their instrumental ability. But then you had Pete Ham with these amazing, just heart-rending pop songs, and of course they had the original version of Without You,
which is on our playlist, but it's the Harry Nilsson version.
And I don't want to go on too much longer about Badfinger, because if you don't know their story, it is to truly appreciate Badfinger, you really do need to know their story, and it's a very sad story.
Very, yes, tragic.
Not one but two band members committed suicide because of all of the tribulations they had dealing with the music business and shady management and record labels failing. It's everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for these guys when they should have been absolutely on top of the world with multiple worldwide hits. A song that Harry Nilsson took to the top of the U.S. charts for multiple weeks. A song that's become a standard. Without You.
And their first hit written by Paul McCartney.
Right, the patronage of the Beatles.
Come and get it.
First signing to Apple Records. They had, the full support of the Beatles. They had George Harrison helping produce their records. They had Paul McCartney writing songs for them. And then after, they had their own hits. They have hits from others just a couple of years in, and they've got no money because they're being just robbed blind by their manager. And then the record label fails and just things start spiraling out of control. But without knowing all that, the songs don't hit nearly as deeply. Once you know their story, then you start listening to the Badfinger music that comes after the quote-unquote glory years, so post Straight Up album. So their first two records, No Dice and Straight Up, have all of their hits on them. And then several albums released after that, still with a ton of incredible music on it. And then their struggles with their label, with their management, with the music industry, with their families, their love life, their financial struggles, that all starts feeding in to the songs and the lyrics. And once you know their story, it becomes pretty powerful listening. And then knowing the fate of Pete Ham and Tom Evans, it's an emotional listen. So yeah, you said Say No More. I've only listened to it once, and I figured it would be a grower because none of the songs jump out. They're all strong. They're flexing their rock muscles. They're kind of doing a little AC/DC boogie on a couple of tracks on side one.
On side one, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like side two. It is more 80s sounding, but that's more in my wheelhouse. I like it when bands from the 70s sound like, when they make albums in the 80s, sound like the 80s,
And they actually had a minor hit off this record. Their first one since Straight Up. Just outside the top 50. Hold on. Did make the Billboard charts, surprisingly, this late in the game. And there is some YouTube footage of them performing on TV this iteration of the band. But anyway, so, you hear the Badfinger in that slide guitar solo in I Love You. And now here's a different brand of band strife. The band hated this. Everybody except the writer and the vocalist, Derek Holt, hated this song. They didn't want it on the record. They didn't want to perform it live. They didn't want to have anything to do with this song. But lo and behold, the record label sees a hit. It gets released as a single, makes the top 40 in America, and it's one of just two Climax blues bands to reach the top 40.
And they have to perform it live because it's one of their only hits.
But it's funny. If you try to find this song on a compilation, good luck to you. It's not on very many. It's on the Zack and Miri Make a Porno soundtrack. It's on only a couple Climax Blues Band compilations. Most of the main ones skip it. I've got one CBB comp on CD. It's not on there. So if you don't buy the Flying the Flag album, which came out in 1980, the single's released in 81, it's very hard to find this. And it's not licensed to various artist comps either. Other than that Zack and Miri Make a Porno soundtrack, I don't know of any other various artist compilations. I'm sure there's one or two out there somewhere, but they're very obscure if they are around, which is a shame because it is such a great song. It's one of those songs. Now, at the time, it became very popular at weddings. It's just It's a sentimental song. It's a straight love song, and one of those songs that certainly is going to, anybody who started dating around that time. It's probably going to take them back
to the era. Yeah. But it's funny because it does not sound like a song that was released in 1981. It really sounds more late 70s soft rock, like mid to late 70s,
or even early 70s. Could have been on
70s.
Could have been on a McCartney and Wings album. Could have been on a Badfinger album in the early 70s.
Yeah, it feels really out of place of the era, and it's. because it has that soft rock sound, and because of the way the guitar sound is much more 70s. It does not have anything to it that sounds 80s.
No,
and the guitar and the piano is actually played by Nicky Hopkins,
right.
who was a session musician who played with the Stones. He played with the Who. He actually is the one who plays piano on "Song Is Over" and "Getting in Tune" from Who's Next. Some really great piano work there. I mean, he's legendary, and he plays piano on this song, which is the main instrument. I mean, like it's a song written for piano.
How about that resume, huh? Played on multiple Stones albums, multiple Who albums, and I think he played on every solo Beatles record.
Yes, he did.
Not every, no, but
but each Beatle
record,
he had played with them.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That was surprising to me to find out that he was actually the one playing.
And that puts him in select company. I think there's only a couple of session musicians that have played with all four Beatles. Jim Keltner, I think, is one. Although I'm not certain.
I don't know if he played with Paul McCartney.
Yeah, that I'm not certain of.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, I mean, the albums, they actually had another album that came out in 1981. Flying the Flag came out in 1980, but the song was a hit from that album in 81. And then they had another album that came out in 81 that I like better than Flying the Flag. It's cheesy, but it sounds more 80s. It does have an 80s sound to it. And there's one song on that album that could have been a radio hit. I think it's called "So Good After Midnight." I don't know if it's on any of the compilations, but it's a cool song. I mean, it kind of sounds a little bit like a second-rate Eagles playing new wave, which seems like an odd thing, but it kind of works for them.
Yeah, I listened to the Flying the Flag album. Nothing on there as good as "I Love You," and the one thing I did notice, the other single. I'd have to look up the name now. Colin Cooper had it might have actually been the first single on the record. I mean, if anybody in the band is complaining, okay, we're just getting too pop, too slick here, there's a couple other tracks on that album that are pretty slick and leaning in the pop. So it's not a great leap to go from there to "I Love You."
No.
So
I think a lot of it is the lyrics, though, because there's parts where they talk about, like, I'm growing my hair and like drinking the beer.
I really like the lyrics.
Wow, this guy is really living on the edge, isn't he? He's growing his hair in 1980. Like, come on. I think the long hair thing is like, not a big deal anymore.
Hitting the town, growing my hair.
And then the second line's like, I don't know, something, drinking the beer. It's like, wow, had a few too many beers, huh? You better watch out.
You picked me up from off the floor, gave me a smile. No, I love this song.
I love
really
the vocals,
do.
though.
Really
and actually, what really makes this song, too, is the backup vocals. Ooh, I want you.
Well,
that in the chorus.
And that's part of the package with Climax Blues Bands. You've got great instrumentalists across the board, wonderful band chemistry, a cooking rhythm section, a lead guitarist who is really underappreciated. I mean, he's up there with the great blues rock guitarists in my book. And there's plenty of live evidence to be found on YouTube of this. But you've got multiple songwriters and vocalists too, and when they do harmonies, it's solid. So, and then Derek Holt, who takes the lead vocal on this, he's got the high harmonies, and I tell you, he gets up into the stratosphere on some of those songs. So, I mean, listen to Couldn't Get It Right. There's some really high harmonies on that song, and even higher ones if you dig around on YouTube.
Yeah, like that part.
Yeah. So this is a band that I'm definitely going to be exploring further down the road, thanks to Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist.
That's what we're here for.
So we're still dinking around the early part of 1981. So in February of that year, We talked about this a couple of episodes back. Same week of release, you had Rush, Moving Pictures, and then the very next day, Face Value by Phil Collins comes out. This is Valentine's week. Interesting timing for the Phil Collins record, since this is very much a breakup record inspired by his recent divorce. And 1981 would be a huge year for not only Phil Collins, but the band Genesis. So the Face Value album's coming on the heels of Genesis's Duke album, which came out in 1980, which is continuing their transition into kind of a different animal from what they were in the 1970s. Now, this had started over the preceding albums. They were reduced to a trio after the departure of guitarist Steve Hackett, and then they released the end. Then there were 3 albums. Then Duke comes out in 1980, which is really moving toward a different sound for them, and they're kind of on the cutting edge of modern rock in the early 80s as far as working synthesizers into the mix, streamlining their sound, shorter songs, more pop-oriented, more targeted toward radio. You had the final 2 tracks on Duke, which is a nod to their progressive past. Really, my favorite part of the album is the end pieces, the extended instrumental work out there at the end. Then Phil Collins comes out with Face Value early in 1981. Later on in the year, Genesis releases their next album, Abacab. The man in the studio helping them record both of these albums is Hugh Padgham. We've already talked about Hugh Padgham in 1980 because he was Steve Lillywhite's right-hand man in the studio, his lead engineer, and creating some cutting-edge work for several bands in 1980, but most importantly, in terms of what we're talking about here with Phil Collins of Genesis, was the Peter Gabriel album. Peter Gabriel, of course, the former lead singer of Genesis, who departed after The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway album in 1974, released his 3rd solo record in 1980, produced by Steve Lillywhite, Hugh Padgham engineering, and they were experimenting with some effects on the drums on that album and came up with something that would be very influential for the rest of the decade. Now, whether or not that specific sound debuted on that record is in question, because these guys also worked on the XTC album of that year, my album pick of the year for 1980, Black Sea. Both those albums and the Phil Collins record and the Genesis record all recorded in the same studio, Townhouse. And part of the reason you get that drum sound is that drum room in that studio with the rock walls. Mm-hmm. Then you add in the engineering tricks that they discovered, the gated snare sound, the noise gate. It's gated reverb applied to the drums. So, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a drummer, but to make it simple, reverb is when you add a lot of reverberation, echo, and it makes things sound bigger. It makes it sound like it's in a big space where the sound is bouncing off the room. So you put a lot of reverb on the drums, and then you add a noise gate, which is cutting off the, I guess you call it the decay, the sound decay. So you hit the drum, and it makes that sound as the stick hits the drum. And then there's the aftermath of that, what the sound does after it leaves that immediate area, as it reverberates around the vicinity in the room and the walls, the ceiling, the floor, whatever. So you have reverb, and then you have a setting that just cuts off that sound decay. And what they came up with was just this booming, loud, in-your-face sound. And that coupled with the specific drum room at the Townhouse, and these are some of the most powerful drum sounds ever heard on records coming out in 1980 and 81. Now, the most famous song on Face Value is the first track, which is In the Air Tonight. And that's where most people, I think, really heard this drum sound for the first time.
Yeah,
and you
that's what
had
they would equate it with, and
right.
which would kind of become the signature sound for Phil Collins at that time
Yes.
and beyond, and many other drummers,
And
but
you had to
yeah.
wait for it too. You had to wait for it because the
Mhm.
song goes on with just a kind of a little tinkling, a little
A
drum
a
machine
drum
percussion.
machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
Um,
is funny because this isn't the only song that they use a drum machine where Phil Collins uses a drum machine because they also one of the most popular songs on Abacab, Man in the Corner, does they also use a drum machine. And it's kind of funny that one of the best drummers in the world is using a drum machine. He was writing songs with starting with this album, Phil was writing songs with the drum machine. And for Abacab, that was the first time, the first Genesis album where they started writing songs with the drum machine too for demos. And
so
some of
yeah,
them just stuck, with the songs.
so Phil, his wife leaves him. I think she laid down an ultimatum before they went off and toured. Duke said, "Don't expect me to be around if you leave on this tour. I'm sick of having you gone all the time." And Genesis, of course, they're moving into the big leagues right now. So they've been a band for over 10 years at this point, but they're really making that leap into big arenas and eventually stadia. Um, so it's a critical time for the band. So he can't just leave them. So he chooses the band. His wife follows through with her threat, leaves with the kids, and all of a sudden he's got a bunch of time on his hands and he starts pouring his heart onto the page and working on these songs. And like you said, Sheryl, he's using a drum machine in his home studio, putting together these home demos. And eventually he would like the sound on a couple of tracks and leave it there. So that's how In the Air Tonight starts, with this drum machine, this slow build up, this kind of haunting synth in the background.
Hmm.
And
And the
then,
lyrics, he basically just sat down with a recorder and just kind of ad libbed whatever came to mind.
which is
So,
interesting because there's so many people believe that this song is about a specific incident. There's this
yeah,
urban
yeah,
legend that somehow developed years ago, and it still persists, that Phil Collins saw, basically the song is literal. He saw somebody drowning and somebody who refused to, or who wouldn't help the
lend a
drowning person.
hand. Yeah.
Which obviously leads to the next question. Well, what's the matter with you, Phil? You can't swim? It's like, what are you doing to help the situation, Phil?
He's on the sidelines writing a song about
That's
it.
right. I must write this down.
Just watching.
But no, he just, all these lyrics just came off the top of his head. He said it's completely meaningless. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
And people will read into it, forever thinking that they can understand what it's about or make up a story or whatever. But no, it was just a total free form, whatever came to mind. And he he was coming from a place of where he was really hurting and struggling. He had just finished recording with John Martin's playing drums on John Martin's album Grace and Danger, which is also about a breakup and a very emotional and intense album and he became close friends with him too. And so they were kind of like wallowing in their sorrows together. And this album is so interesting to me because I really had never spent a lot of time listening to it in the past. I mean, of course I know the songs, the hits from the album,
But
but I hadn't really.
before you go
Oh,
on
go
with
ahead.
this,
Okay,
so
go ahead.
let's take ourselves back to the era. The first I ever heard of Genesis was Misunderstanding, when that was a hit. That was
Mhm.
my introduction to Genesis. And then the next thing I would have heard would have been I Missed Again. Um, I don't recall, I do not recall hearing In the Air Tonight as a first. Correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, but that song really became big later on when it was used in Miami Vice. I think that's when it
Yeah,
really
and I
became,
think also like
yeah,
after MTV
yeah,
because
yeah,
the video was on MTV all the time. So I think that's really what shot it, through the stratosphere.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean and that song and a lot of his other songs were used on Miami Vice. I mean, he's kind of like, I equate them together. You know, when I think of Miami Vice, I think of Phil Collins and Glenn Frey.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think MTV is really what brought it, what really made it like a song that you'd hear all the time. I
So
don't remember hearing it at the time.
do you remember I Missed Again and In the Air Tonight as singles on the radio, contemporary?
No,
Contemporary,
not
yeah.
really. Mm-mm. But I do remember seeing the video on MTV and
Yeah.
I Missed Again video too. No, I don't really. That's why this album is so. I just had never taken the time to actually go back and like really listen to the album all the way through.
So you became a
I
Genesis
never
fan.
owned it.
You became a Genesis fan, and correct?
Oh yeah, but later.
Right.
Later. I was not a fan at the time. Although actually I guess the first album that I really got into was the self-titled Genesis, the one
Yeah.
that came out in 83. That's the first album that I owned.
First one I owned too.
And
yeah.
So
I would have had the cassette tape
heard,
of that one.
oh yeah. I'm sure that I heard the songs, like I remember hearing Misunderstanding on the radio. I remember hearing Turn It On Again, you know, those. And they used to play one of the live, they used to play the well, it was the Three Sides Live video that accompanied that on Night Flight and like late night video, you know, music video TV, or not MTV, but on Night Flight. Yeah, so I think I would say the first album that I just like really got into was the one from the self-titled from 1983.
So that was your portal into Genesis fandom, and then you would have gone from there to Abacab next, or Invisible Touch.
Oh no, not Invisible Touch. No, Abacab. And okay, actually, so I don't know, what am I doing? I'm getting confused in my head here because yes, I did have Abacab when it came. I did really, really like Abacab, the singles from Abacab when it first came out.
Yeah.
I remember listening to No Reply at All, like on my Walkman, you know, like a cassette that I had made from either I had taped it off of the radio or from an album or someone, you know, a friend's album. So yeah, so actually I guess I should say that's the first album that I got into.
So you got into Abacab, you got the Genesis self-titled, and then from there started. When did you get into the Peter Gabriel era?
Not until later, because then I started getting into Yes and more prog stuff and Rush. I didn't get into that stuff until I was in high school. And then I started going back and listening to some of the Peter Gabriel stuff. But really, that was later. I mean, even like after I met Mike, because he's a huge Genesis fan. And then I had access to all the albums because he had all the album or all the CDs, or, you know, so I could go back and listen to all of them at that point.
So I
was later. I was not listening to this stuff contemporarily.
All right. So the point of driving home here is you were a big Genesis fan and got into all eras of Genesis, listened to all these albums before you ever went down the Phil Collins solo road.
Yeah. And I never owned Face Value. I didn't own it when it came out. I didn't own it, you know.
Me neither.
And I never really was that inclined to go listen to it. And that's why I'm finding this so interesting now that I have gone back and listened to it and really listened to it, you know, several times. It's so strange to me to think about a time when Phil Collins was just the lead singer and drummer of Genesis, and a lot of people really just didn't know who he was. You know, they weren't equating him as even you know, his face might have been recognizable, but the short amount of time it took him to become a superstar as a solo artist, you know, is like so fascinating to me. It's just weird to think about it. I mean, this is his first solo album, and you know, people recognize his voice from if you didn't know anything of Genesis, you may know the songs, the radio songs like Misunderstood, Turn It On Again are the ones I can think of from Duke, and then No Reply at All and Abacab, but that wasn't as much a radio song. I guess it was an FM radio song, but
No,
mostly
that was
No
a hit.
Reply at
That was
All.
a hit. That was definitely
Okay,
top
so
40.
Abacab and No Reply at All.
And then that's Illegal Alien, and That's All from the next album. Where
Mama, and that was on the radio.
that was more of an FM. That was more of an
that
FM
was more
song.
an FM song. Yeah.
And Home by the Sea, that was a big
Home by the
FM
Sea,
song.
yeah. But I'm just thinking, it's just so weird to me to think about Phil Collins, people not real, or him not being a superstar, you know, like he's just the drummer and the lead singer of Genesis. That's like this prog band that has a couple hits that you might have heard on the radio.
Only the lead singer by default, because they couldn't find anybody to replace Peter Gabriel. They auditioned over 100 singers. And then I think Phil had sung on a track or two during the Peter Gabriel era, at least one.
And he was definitely doing a lot of backup vocals.
Yeah.
And when he started in the band, they were like, "Oh, good, you can sing," because Mike Rutherford, at that time, the band was Steve Hackett and Phil Collins were started at the same time, joined the band at the same time. So it was Peter Gabriel, Mike Rutherford, Tony Banks, Steve Hackett, and Phil Collins, and none of the other guys really sang, you know. So I mean, Steve Hackett a bit, but so they were like, "Oh, good, he can sing backup vocals because no one else can." And then once Peter Gabriel left, they auditioned singers, and actually Steve Hackett left too. So now, well, actually no, he didn't leave yet. There were two. They had two albums with that lineup after
Wind and Wuthering and
Gabriel left. Trick of the Tail, and so it was just kind of like Phil stepped in one day and just started singing one of the songs, and they were actually that sounds pretty good. And in fact,
all right, lads, I guess I'll give it a go.
And you know, actually, you sound kind of like Peter. You know, your voice sounds pretty similar to Peter Gabriel's.
They both have a soulful style.
Yeah, so you know, this might work. So it was just like by default, he took over lead singer duties, and that's, you know, I mean, the rest is history from there.
So, and then he becomes this solo superstar with hit after hit after hit throughout the 80s into the 90s. And it's really incredible when you think about it. We've referenced this multiple times leading up to this era that we're dealing with right now, 79 to 81. How interesting this era is, because it's the last gasp for a lot of musicians before MTV scorched the earth. And what MTV did was they killed off the singer-songwriter, essentially. And all of these kind of hairy, tubby, you know, sensitive songwriter types are
hairy or balding
prog guys. And then here's Phil Collins, who's not exactly pinup material. Okay, he's short, bald. He did shave his beard, which was probably a good move with the emergency man. He did shave but he was bearded before, not long before MTV came around. He was sporting a big old beard. But this is not.
He just looks like the bloke next door, you know, wearing average, just like he's so not, average.
He's not ugly. He's just kind of an average. He's just an average looking guy, you know, might be propping up the bar at your local tavern, you know.
Yeah.
And this guy becomes this huge solo star. It's a testament to the quality of the music.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I mean, he had been a session musician too on countless albums throughout the 70s, and I think one of the things too about Phil Collins, and this kind of just does come across it comes across someone in his music, but definitely when you watch him live or something, you know, he has a personality that everyone likes him. He's just very likable. He's just he's funny, he's easy to be around, you know, you can just tell that. And so I think that there's something about that he was, that I think he actually was able to play off that on MTV in a way that, you know, some of the videos, he's really goofy, you know, he's like goofing around, and it kind of, you see a personality there.
The same cannot be said for the rest of Genesis. These are a bunch of hoity-toity private, you know, public school. I mean, the band was formed at this elite public school, which is a private school in England, Charterhouse. These guys are all from wealthy backgrounds. Phil Collins, not the same kind of background. No, he's not poor. I mean, he's not, I wouldn't say his background is working class, but I'd say lower middle class, where the other guys were upper middle class. And he had the most entertainment experience. He was a child actor before he joined.
He was
the
in A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah.
As a child.
He's actually a cute kid, you know, when you see the pictures of him.
He was an extra in A Hard Day's Night. Yeah, and you know, when he joined, he wasn't an original member, but when he joined the band, Peter Gabriel, as the front man of Genesis, had the most elaborate theatrical presence, and you know, was wearing costumes and like just the most bizarre looks he had going on stage. And it you know, it had a bit of a pretentiousness about it in that sense. And
they
so
were
once
they were weird. I mean, you had these
yes
the strange lyrics, weird, long, epic songs, there's these crazy costumes, and then, you know, very theatrical Peter Gabriel in the costumes, and then the rest of the band are sitting on chairs while they're playing.
yeah, and they just look so normal, and
they're just sitting down, like looking down at their.
You can't even see them really. Yeah, they're just like background props, basically. And so once Peter Gabriel left, and now Phil Collins is the lead singer on tour, you know, number one, they needed to get another drummer in there because it's really hard to be a front man when you're behind a drum kit. And number two, you know, his whole style and everything about him was so different from Peter Gabriel. He didn't have any of the theatrics. He looked like he just walked out of the pub, you know, like the way he's dressed. And he added humor and added, you know, kind of levity to their live performances, and their songs gradually started moving in that direction too. They started becoming more poppy. They were still, you know, they still had prog songs on all of those albums up until the self-titled Genesis in 83. But Duke, Abacab, you know, they still have like 2 or 3 songs on them that are long passages that, well, mostly Duke does. Abacab does have a few, but they were very intentionally trying. Me and Sarah Jane and Dodo, you know, that's a longer lurker. But they were very intentionally trying to get away from that sound. And in fact, when they recorded that album, they had like an hour's worth of, they had enough for a double album, and they scrapped like half of it because they thought that it sounded too much like what would be considered, you know, like typical Genesis. And they were trying to get away from that, from the longer passages and from, you know, longer instrumentals and stuff like that. So they were definitely working now more. They'd already had, their last few albums had 1 or 2 songs that were definitely in the pop vein and were hits, pop hits even. But now they're getting to be, by Abacab, more than half of this album is on the pop spectrum. And, you know, going back to Face Value, one of the things that's so cool about that album, and that I really hadn't paid that much attention to, I mean, I'd say like half of it is kind of ballads and very slow, quiet. The other half, he employed the Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Phoenix horns. So that's the sound that you get like on I Missed Again. And several songs on the album use them. And it's really, really cool. And it's such a departure from anything that he had at that time that they had done with Genesis. And he actually, I mean, Phil Collins went into this wanting to put out an album that sounded like a Black album. Like he was going for that sound, and to the point where he
longtime fan of Motown and soul music.
And he wanted the album to be, or because he wanted that sound, he started looking at the albums that he really liked of that genre, like the Jacksons and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and he found the name Mike Reese, who was the guy that I guess who worked with those bands, and he had him master the album to get that sound. So, he was very intentional about that. And then that carried over into Abacab. No reply at all. They used the Phoenix horns, which is actually the song that I'm choosing for the playlist.
Great choice. Killer groove on this song. Love everything about it. God, Phil Collins is such a masterful drummer.
Oh, yeah.
The drum patterns on this are just gorgeous.
Yes. I love the drums on this song. I love the vocals. I love the horns. I love singing to it with it.
It's got that soul influence, bringing in the Earth, Wind, and Fire guys, but this song doesn't sound like a soul song. It's very unique groove to it.
Yeah, and I think part of that uniqueness too is the keyboards,
right?
Because
yes,
Tony.
That
Yeah,
keyboard.
all of a sudden I wanted to say Tony K. Why can't I? What's his
Tony
name?
Banks.
Tony Banks. Okay, Tony Banks does, and you can see it if you watch the video. So the video for this song and for Abacab is actually just them recording in the studio, and he does this funny little like patter thing with both hands where he's going, like kind of just like tapping the keyboards in a certain way, and it makes a really unique sound that is going on throughout the whole song.
It's a critical element to the what makes it unique. Really, kind of separates it from being a soul pastiche. I think you've got elements feeding into it, but it's its own thing. It's its own unique groove. And then you've got Mike Rutherford just going off on the bass on this song.
Yes, and there's no guitar on this song.
No,
it's just bass, keys, and drums and vocals. Yeah, and the bass lines are just awesome. And I have to say,
leading up to
Mike
the chorus,
Rutherford,
oh my God. It's
yes,
incredible.
And then how it builds and it's so cool. And Mike Rutherford is very underappreciated, I think. And really just so flies under the radar. Genesis, once Steve Hackett left, they didn't bring on any other guitarists.
No,
so
just
now,
a touring guitarist. They didn't
just
bring,
a touring guitarist. Yeah, and they had a touring guitarist and a touring drummer who actually in the 70s, in 77 for, I forget what album it is, I think Trick of the Tail, Bill Bruford was their touring drummer. And he did one tour with them, and they asked him to come back, but he didn't. He said no. But then Chester Thompson came on and became their drummer from then on.
I don't think Bill Bruford was interested in any group that was in the process of simplifying its sound. That's not.
No, they were
really
going in the wrong direction for him. Yeah, he's the drummer for King Crimson. People don't know. So anyway, they didn't bring on any other guitarists. So now Mike Rutherford is guitar and bass on all their albums from then on. And they're a trio, after, and then they were three. That was the first album where it was a trio. And it's amazing. And he's using bass pedals and, he's just, I really think that he's very underappreciated and really an incredible musician. So yeah, I love the bass in the song and the whole groove to it, the drums, everything about it. And I remember, this is one of those songs too that sounds really good on headphones. And I remember listening to it like on my Walkman, or like or like a friend whose dad had a really nice stereo with headphones, and like it sounds great. And I think it's so cool that these albums kind of came out like so close to each other. They weren't working on them at the same time, but Phil Collins says that when they went in to record Abacab and every Genesis album after that, because now they all had solo careers. Mike Rutherford and Tony Banks had solo albums out too, like in the late 70s and early 80s, and
nobody bought them.
Nobody cared about them, which nobody may have ever cared about Phil Collins' solo albums either, if it weren't for the fact that he had, worked with the right musicians, the right producers. And I mean, granted, he's the voice of Genesis, so he is the lead singer, so that does
And
like give him more to go with. But
the right label
but
too. Ahmet Erdogan was still very involved with Atlantic Records, and he really liked his demos.
oh
And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And so, and he just came up with this. I mean, that song just became so iconic. In the Air Tonight just became so iconic for him too that it just boosted him through the stratosphere. But um he says that when they went into the studio to record his Genesis, they never came in with songs already. They wrote together. They wrote their song, they built the songs together. One of them might have come in with an idea or something, but then they built it together. So it wasn't like, which is interesting to me too, because I find them to be a little bit similar to like the Who. They're bands that have been around since the 60s, mostly 70s for Genesis, and they started in the late 60s, but 70s, and they're still putting out albums in the 80s, at the same time putting out solo albums, which is what Pete Townsend was doing. But Pete was writing and for the band and solo at the same time. And he was kind of like taking songs and thinking, well, what's going to work better for me to solo? Or this is, I want to keep this song for myself, maybe give the band this. They weren't doing that. Phil Collins wasn't doing that. It was a completely separate entity, his solo work versus the Genesis work. It did bleed into each other because, like I said, you got the Phoenix horns and No Reply at All, and you have some similarities there. But yeah, so anyway, also hadn't really listened to Abacab in a long time all the way through, and spent some time with this album
side one is
over the
great.
last couple of days. Side one is great. I agree. I would say it's a very inconsistent album. There's a couple songs on this album that are ballads that do not make sense for Genesis.
And I would say side one, Me and Sarah Jane is my least favorite song, but it's one you got to kind of stick with it. It starts slow, and then it eventually kind of unfolds and opens up, and it's very beautiful at the end.
Actually, that's a song that has grown on me a lot because I've always kind of been like, oh, I don't know. It's kind of weird. It has like a weird rhythm to it. It's kind of like it's quirky. It's quirky.
Hard to get a grip on it in the first couple of minutes, but then it just, it like I said, it's unfolding and unfurling. And it's quite beautiful. Epic.
It's
finish.
Like glorious.
Yes,
at the end.
But Abacab is just a killer lead track, and there's your drum.
I love the way Abacab starts so much. It's just like pow.
Those drums are so in your face.
Yes.
And then No Reply at All comes in after that, of course. Keep It Dark, absolutely love.
I love Keep It Dark, and that actually was a single. They made a video for it. It didn't do anything, but I love it. I think it's really cool. It's just so relentless. It has like that relentless synth in it, and that's probably the most modern sounding song, I think, that like 80s sounding song, I guess. But I love it. I think it's really cool.
That beautiful chorus,
drum
that
break
rising
in the middle.
chorus up at Stewart's. Phil is showing the top end there. And then Dodo Lurker, another killer track.
Starts like a King Crimson song. Yeah. It's dark and like in your face. Yeah.
It's dark, but there's a thread of humor to it too.
Yeah, there is. And that song, that and Me and Sarah Jane are the only really prog sounding songs on the album.
Then you get to side two, and this is definitely wanted to hear your take.
Oh my God.
So you said they recorded 2 albums worth of material.
Yes.
They left all this other stuff, including Paper Late, which was a hit.
Paper Late. Why didn't they use that song instead of Who Done It? You can't tell me that they don't have a better song out of the hours worth of material they recorded than Who Done It.
Ahmet Erdogan, the big wig at Atlantic, loved Who Done It, and he practically insisted that they put it on the album. And I'm just like, what?
Oh, man.
Why?
Yeah, I mean, really, because
Do you know what that song?
Sure.
You know what that song reminds me of? It's like the Andy Summers songs on the police, like the jokey novelty songs on the police sounds like that everybody skips. Yes.
No, yes. You hear that? And especially because I was wondering too about Paper Late. So they actually, after this album, they put out in England an EP called 3x3, and it has Paper Late on it and a couple other songs that were from those songs they scrapped. And in America, they put out 3 Sides Live, which has 3 sides of a live show, and then the 4th side are those songs that they didn't put out on ABBA-Cap, and one of them is Paper Late, which is a great song. It was a top 40 hit.
Yeah.
And I love that song. It's got the horns. It sounds a lot like I Missed Again, actually. It's a similar, with the horns especially. And I was thinking, well, wait, when did they record that? Is that why they didn't put it on here? But no, they recorded that song at the same time in the 80 and 81. So why on earth they chose not to put it on there, even if they really did want to keep Whodunit just because it's goofy and, the other 2 ballads, or you might recall, or no, what is it? There's 2 more songs that I don't even remember the names of them now because I was just like, meh, they don't
Another
belong
record.
on the album. Yes, those are just
That's all right.
Boring.
Man on the Corner is a good song.
Oh, I love Man on the Corner. That's the only thing that's safe side 2. And that's another one where you got the drum machine, starts with the drum machine. And it's got, I think the vocals are really beautiful on it, actually. And no, I think that's a great song. I love that song. And that was a song that was a hit. That song was a hit for them too. But yeah, the other 2 songs are just throwaways. And I think definitely Paper Late. There's a couple songs because I went and listened to, I listened to the, we have those box sets that have like the extra discs on them with like random tracks, and most of the stuff that they didn't put on ABBA-Cab is on there. And there's at least Paper Late and another one called You Might Recall that I really liked, and I was like, those 2 would have been way better.
Like a song called Me and Virgil or something about Virgil.
That's one.
That's one.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I think it's a very inconsistent album, because the songs that are good, and especially the hits on it, are great. And then you got 2 pretty interesting and quite cool, actually, prog songs. And then you have Throwaway. The rest of it's just throwaway.
That's a good note to lead me on to our final song here, the episode. Now, going into 1981, I said that I had no idea what my favorite album of the year would be, and this was going to be a fun process of listening to all these albums. And again, this is the great joy of doing this podcast, is discovering new music and new favorites. And this is the first one that's really hit me hard that I didn't know much about before. And this is the band Split Enz. They released an album in 1981 called Waiata, or if you're in Australia, it was Corroboree. The song that I'm choosing from this album is called History Never Repeats, which is also the title of Greatest Hits album by Split Enz. And I think a lot of American music fans that have Split Enz in their collections, that's probably, they either have the History Never Repeats collection, or they have their 1980 album, which was called True Colors, which had their best known song, I Got You, on it. So I've been aware of Split Enz for forever. I've known the song I Got You for a long time, like it. But I never really listened to them that closely until recently. And wow, have I been missing out. So I love the fact that this is the record that I really discover my love for this band on, because it's an overlooked record for them. I was thinking about, I was driving around today and I saw a 56 Chevy went past me on the right as I'm driving down TV Highway. And I was thinking that's the perfect metaphor for this type of album, because if you're into classic cars, 55 Chevys and 57 Chevys are very popular collector cars. The 56, not so much. Overlooked, not as appreciated, not as valuable. So this album falls in between True Colors, which was kind of their worldwide breakthrough album. It had their best known hit song on it. And then the album after this, Time and Tide, is considered one of maybe their best album by many people. And I think you were a big fan of
it's going to be in
album.
contention for me for album of that year. I love that album. And it does have some hits on it too. They're some of their biggest hits.
So Waiata, Waiata, or Corroboree, Corroboree, falls in between these two kind of iconic albums. And it didn't, it was kind of underappreciated. It didn't get great reviews, and was, like I said, somewhat overlooked. But you've got 4 songs on this record that are absolute bangers. I mean, just top of the line, top tier pop songs. And when this album first hit me, I was like, oh God, I love this record. Which of these songs am I going to choose? And I just kind of without thinking too much, I grabbed History Never Repeats. And it was the right choice because I've listened to it a few more times since. And now I think this is one of the greatest new wave songs of this era, in my opinion. I like it that much. It is so great. So Split Enz is a very interesting history with this band. First of all, they're from New Zealand, which nowadays, everybody's from New Zealand. It seems like every other actor in a big movie is a Kiwi these days. They're everywhere.
Oh,
you got Taika Waititi is one of the biggest, most influential people in Hollywood right now. The writer director from New Zealand. All these actors from New Zealand are showing up in American movies. A lot of people don't even realize it. I'm very attuned.
People probably think they're Australian,
or they think they're American because they're playing American parts. But
I see.
I'm very tuned into accents. I can almost always tell when it's a foreigner playing an American. The one who fooled me was Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Great, couldn't tell at all. But back then, nobody from New Zealand had a hit record outside of that area. There had never been a popular music artist from New Zealand that had a worldwide hit song or album. It had just never been done. And very few from Australia, as a matter of fact. I mean, the Bee Gees, obviously, but it's a very short list. So here comes Split Enz. A lot of fascinating aspects to this band. First off, they're best known as being a new wave band, okay? So they come to prominence during the punk new wave era. But they predate that era. Their first albums came out before 1976. Their first album actually came out in 75. And the band had been around since 72. So they start off as this kind of arty, kind of pastoral prog band. Very, very unusual songs and a very unusual look to the group as well. These crazy costumes and weird hairdos. And there's like 18 of these guys on stage.
Yes,
it's like, who are all these people? What are they doing?
It's like they're basically like a whole city in New Zealand.
So they're from Auckland in New Zealand. And the band is centered around 2 people primarily. Tim Finn, who is a multi-instrumentalist and lead singer, and then a guitarist and singer-songwriter named Phil Judd. So their first couple of records, they're primarily the songwriters and singers. And then Phil Judd ends up leaving the group. He was kind of a prickly character. And they always say, if you look at documentaries about Split Enz, it's the enigmatic Phil Judd. And he's a fascinating guy. That's a subject for further research, too. He went on to do some other work in music. But he's a really good-looking guy. I mean, he's a frontman. I mean, he's a born frontman. And just unusual songs and singing style and just a very arresting quality to their music. Kind of unsettling. Like I said, pastoral, but just off-kilter,
Yeah. Like sometimes they look like they're in a circus. You
Yeah.
know? Like they're dressed like mimes almost, like with checkered things in outfits, and then their hair. I mean, they probably have the weirdest hair I have ever seen of any band, and that's including the Flock of Seagulls
Yes,
guy.
and this is years before Flock of Seagulls. This is
Way
years
before that, and all of them do. It's not just like one of them has that. They all have like a whole section that's like spiked up in a triangle. There's a lot of triangles and diamond shaped things all over them, including their hair.
Crazy clothes, loud, garish outfits, like clown suits.
Like jesters, and clowns,
So the guy was primarily responsible for their visuals. His name's Noel Crombie. Now, when we talk about what are all these people doing on stage, this guy basically showed up, wanted to be in the band, and they liked him. So they just kind of gave him various things to do on different songs. One thing he could do was play the spoons. So they would they'd create a little segment for him to come out there and do a spoon solo. But he would handle like various percussion duties, and he would eventually become their drummer, and he would do a pretty good job of it in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they're this weird arty band, and they're starting to make a name for themselves in New Zealand. They moved to Australia. They're getting a foothold there. They know that their eyes are on the big prize. They know they've got to go to England or America to get there, which really makes them pioneers coming from New Zealand. Because like I said, nobody from New Zealand had ever had any kind of a worldwide popular song hit. So Phil Judd eventually leaves the group. Tim Finn brings in his kid brother, Neil. And it was very young. I mean, he's younger.
He looks so young.
Oh, gosh, he looks so young. So he's just barely 20 years old, I think, maybe even 19 when he's plays on the first album he plays on, Frenzy, which is 79. And then, the reason that he thought Neil would fit in the group, because he not only was he a talented guitarist and singer, but he writes. And boy, does he write. Oh, my God. So Neil Finn, I don't know if a lot of people know this who haven't been following Fleetwood Mac recently. He's in Fleetwood Mac.
He took over Lindsey Buckingham's space, right?
If you were a fan of Split Enz back in the early 80s, like When I Got You was popular, and their videos were some of the first played on MTV in 1981.
Yeah.
Could you have imagined that years down the road, this kid in this weird band from New Zealand would be in Fleetwood Mac? What?
Yeah.
What?
It still seems odd to me, really, because it makes more sense if you think of the fact that he also formed Crowded House.
Yeah.
And, they had hits in the later 80s, early 90s. Something So Strong was probably their most popular hit.
Oh, no. Don't Dream It's Over was the
no. Don't Dream It's Over. That's the one. Yeah. Something So Strong was a hit. But Don't Dream It's Over was huge.
Massive hit.
That I can see more him being in Fleetwood Mac from that. But yeah, it does still seem weird to me. Even then,
the prospect of him being in Fleetwood seemed weird. But not so weird once you start to get a grip on the depth of his talent and the length and breadth and consistently excellent quality of the music that he has produced over the years, not just in Split Enz, not just in Crowded House, but also he put out an album with his brother Tim. Most people call the album Finn Brothers. So I think the name of the project was Finn and Brothers, but I think most people just call it Finn Brothers. There's some incredible songs on that record. He did this charity album for Seven Worlds Collide. There were two records. His songs on that record are amazing. He's been doing this for years. He just has an incredible songwriting gift, an incredible gift for melody and hooks. But it's not simple stuff. It's definitely in the XTC Andy Partridge school, where the choruses just blindside you with how catchy they are and melodic. He's not as abrasive as Andy Partridge, not as atonal, but it's kind of the same structure with his pop songs, where the verses are not super melodic, and then the choruses just smack you upside the head with incredible hooks. History Never Repeats structurally is interesting. It just kind of starts, it's almost like it starts in the middle of the song.
Yeah.
But the core, again, very catchy chorus. Interesting key changes in a lot of his songs. I mean, they're super poppy, super catchy, but they're not simple. I mean, there's a lot of key modulations in these songs. And then what really lifts this song into the stratosphere is the instrumental break. There's two instrumental breaks, one in the middle of the song, one at the end, with these chiming guitar chords. And then live, it's even better because these guys rock. I mean, they're coming out of the new wave, group of bands. They're lumped in with that, but there's definitely some muscle in this group, and they can deliver rock with some meat on its bones. Great live band, really good live band. And a lot of these songs in concert, they'll play them out, they'll extend them, and they really rock out. I mean, they do a great rhythm section. You've got Eddie Raymer, the keyboardist, who's their secret weapon, kind of a Steve Naive type, very talented.
Yeah.
So there's so much, and then we're overlooking Tim Finn. I mean, he's got some great stuff on here too. The Hard Act to Follow, the first track on the there's two.
That's a great song.
Yes, it is. There's two versions of this too. So the one that really hit me was I've got the Australian version, Corroboree, and when they remastered the album, they scrambled they shifted all the tracks around, which I think was smart because they moved History Never Repeats up to like the third track, whereas it's the first track on side 2 in the original album. But you got Hard Act to Follow, and then the song I think, Sheryl, that you probably would have chosen if you had to pick one song for this record, which is One Step Ahead.
Yeah, I
Brilliant
love One
pop
Step
song.
Ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. I love the vocals in that song. It just, and it's one of those that just builds up, and just, I think it's a great song. It's very catchy, very poppy, but
that's another Neil Finn song.
And it's understated. It's very understated too.
It's understated, and it's got the little surprise at the end in the lyrics where she's one step ahead of you. He kind of doesn't. He holds that card till the very last seconds of the song. It's the last line of the song. Where it's a relationship song where he and his girl are not quite walking in rhythm.
In sync,
In sync. And then at the end of the song, she's one step ahead of you. So he's stepping away from her onto this other gal who's a step ahead of you. It's just, oh, man. Talk about a knockout punch right at the end of the song. And a lot of his songs are like that. He's a great lyric writer, too. Very clever. Very clever writer of lyrics. So, and then you got I Don't Want to Dance, which...
That song sounds like ecstasy to me.
Yes, and you had to listen to that a couple of times to really hear what's going on with that.
Yeah, you're really super, super girl. It sounds like that song.
It's a clever metaphor too. Actually, well, Hard Act to Follow is a clever metaphor where it's like referencing. And I'm sure Split Enz was in this position where they probably opened for bands and blew them off the stage. So, Hard Act to Follow, it's like in the lyrics, it's talking about like performers being a hard act to follow, profound artists, but it's also tying that in to relationships, end of one relationship. You're a hard act to follow. How am I going to replace you? Then you got Iris, which is this gorgeous psychedelic pop song, which is unlike anything else on the record. That's another just gem of a song. Now, Sheryl and I disagree on this. There's 2 instrumentals on this record, and I think more bands should do instrumentals. I think more bands should do instrumentals, and I think more bands should do cover songs. I think every band that doesn't have a knockout song for each track on an album, find a better song that somebody else wrote and do it. If you can't write one good enough, do a cover.
Yeah, I'm not totally against that. The thing I have about instrumentals, I'm obviously a big fan of prog, so clearly I have no problem with instrumentals, but it's when there are, long, drawn out, complicated time signatures and there's a lot to keep you interested. When you have instrumentals on a pop album or a rock album, I just feel like, why didn't you just write lyrics and sing to it? Like, it doesn't seem like it feels like it gets boring to me
But why do you
usually.
need to write lyrics if the music's good enough? Why do you need lyrics?
Only if the music is good enough. And I've heard very few instrumentals that are not prog where the music is good enough to not put vocals behind it.
Well, Eddie Rayner
On
is an excellent instrumentalist, and Whale is a hell of a cool instrumental. Albert of India, not quite as cool. So the two tracks that really haven't grabbed me on this album, Clumsy and Ships. And then there's Ghost Girl, which I find very interesting. So Split Enz, I think, could have been a band that got played on FM rock radio in America. I mean, they had that muscle. And then Ghost Girl really, to me, it sounds like if it's like the Long May You Run era Stills Young band. If originally that was going to be a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young album, they ended up wiping Crosby and Nash off the tapes, and it was just Stills Young. But it really has kind of that vibe, kind of a CSNY Crazy Horse kind of feel to it. And I could hear that song being played on FM rock radio in 1981. The one drawback is Tim Finn, I think, has a pleasant voice and a likable persona, but his voice is thin. It's not a real pourful voice. Neil Finn's voice is high, but it cuts through better. It's stronger. So,
but I still think his voice lends itself more to that new wave kind of pop sound, or more pop sound, I guess, than rock. So I can see why. And the songs that were released as singles just sounded more like that. Really what did it for them was MTV. They were played early on MTV. They were one of the first bands played on MTV with I Got You. And
I Got You has a great video, too, for that era, certainly.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does, yeah. So I think that's what really made their hits for them, were the popularity on MTV.
And it's funny, the boyish Neil Finn, bit of a sex. You look at a couple of the vintage clips, the live clips. The girls are really screaming for Neil Finn, and he looks to me like a combination of Sean Penn and an Everly brother.
Yeah, he does definitely look like Sean Penn. Yeah. Yeah.
But where has this been all my life? I mean, I've been an XTC fan forever, and I put these guys right in there with the great XTC material. There was no XTC album in 1981. Waiata will have to do. There's just great music on this record.
Well, and the thing is that they don't have the quantity of music like XTC does. Like the albums that they're, I think that starting with True Colors and this album and Time and Tide, I think, are great. Well, I don't know if this album's great. True Colors is. Time and Tide is. This is a good album. And then that's it, isn't it? I don't know how many albums they have out after that.
They put out one more after Tim Finn had left the band, and Neil Finn didn't really have enough songs to support a final album. So they've kind of fleshed it out with some filler.
So Time and Tide is the last album with Neil Finn.
With Tim Finn.
Oh, with Tim Finn. Okay.
Actually, there might have been one after that too. I know their last album, Tim Finn wasn't in the group any longer, and it was, Neil Finn kind of limping to the finish line a little bit, and then moving on to his next project, which would be Crowded House. But I find it interesting too. The Finn brothers, they're just regular guys. I mean, they're they're like the guys next door. Tim Finn, he's kind of tall, ruggedly handsome. Neil Finn, boyish good looks. They're just regular dudes, When you see them interview, they're just kind of laid back and humble, and funny and self-deprecating and just normal. Just normal.
Which is
You
why
know?
it's so shocking to see the early
Right.
incarnation
Yes.
of this band because you're like, "What? Where did that come from?" And I didn't realize that Neil Finn was in the band in that era too when they were dressing that way and had that weird hair because
Yeah.
the live thing I was watching I think was from 77 and they show Tim Finn and yeah, he looks like a kid. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even recognize him because he has such weird makeup on and his hair is so bizarre." But yeah, it was shocking to me when I saw what they were. I'd seen the album covers and I'd seen photos, but I just kind of thought it was just like a one-off thing where they just sort of dressed that way for this photo shoot. But come to find out that that's how they perform live. That's that was their whole look. That was their shtick.
And I tell you, it's a credit to Tim because it's his band. After Phil Judd leaves, it's his band. It's Tim Finn's band. He brings in his brother, and all we know about brothers and popular music, it's the Robinsons, the Gallaghers, the they're
Bee
at each
Gees.
other's throats. Yeah, the Bee Gees broke up for a while. I don't, if these guys fought a lot, it's not really well publicized. They seem to get along like gangbusters whenever you see them or read about them. Tim Finn left the group, but he got an opportunity to do some solo stuff, and they've reunited several times since. Tim was actually in Crowded House for a while on the Woodface album. He's in the group on that album, kind of in and out
Which
of the
is
band.
such a great album. I
Yeah.
love that album. Yeah.
So that's another, interesting thing about this. Brothers that actually get along, and it's to Tim's credit, So they're this weird arty band. He brings in Neil, his kid brother, and recognizes the talent, knows he can write, knows he can play, knows he can sing, but then sees, once he grasps the quality of the songs that Neil is writing, I think Tim kind of sees the writing on the wall and says, we really need to go in a different direction here. So they scrap the crazy costumes and the arty long songs and start writing more concise, catchy, radio-oriented songs, and they become a worldwide sensation. So,
and they don't have quite as many members as they did in the first couple albums, but they still have 5 to 6 members in the band the whole time.
yeah.
So I have to wonder too if it's like, well, they're friends and they don't, they want to stay together. They don't. I mean, that's like they're having to split anything they make between 6 guys. You know what I mean? Or seven guys. And I think I don't really know a lot about the other guys in the band, but I think it's interesting that they continued with that lineup, with those people, with all the other guys too, and kept them in the band when, it was Tim or the Finn brothers are the only ones that I know from that band,
Yeah.
and that continued along the whole way. But even up until Time and Tide, there's still 5 guys in the band.
Yeah, there've been a lot of guys in and out of the band throughout the course of their lifetime.
Okay.
So to end on this, I've talked about my friend Jeff Nelson, who passed away a couple of years ago. Big music fan, had a huge collection that I inherited from him. And he was a huge fan of Split Enz. So I have every Split Enz album, pretty much every note they ever recorded on CD. I've got most of it on vinyl too. And I've had this for a long time now. And I'm only just now discovering how great it is. And, thank you, Jeff, for this bounty of amazing music that I'm going to, really enjoy listening to and discovering here in the weeks and months and years to come. Incredible.
Yeah, and I had never listened to the early stuff, and it is really interesting, and I think that they're pretty fascinating, if not just visually fascinating, musically too, the different styles they do, and just like how some of it is really complicated, and I'm appreciating them more as musicians and artists, just based on what I've heard now of their early material that I had no idea anything about it. I had seen the albums, but I'd never listened to
I
them
think the
before.
closest thing that I would compare their earliest stuff to would be like early Genesis. I mean, like the 69 1970 Genesis, the really early Genesis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and maybe they were influenced by that too in the theatrics with from Peter Gabriel, because they're certainly going in that direction, trying to, put together this whole visual show to, part of their live show. And so there are some other similarities there.
And it's, there's some other bands in the same time frame. They're doing similar things visually, like Sensational Alex Harvey Band. Leo Sayer, I don't know if you've seen vintage clips of him, like in Pierrot clown costumes.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you referenced another group that I think influences Split Enz, which is Cockney Rebel, which I know less about. You're more, I really know little about.
Yeah, Steve Harvey and Cockney Rebel. Yes, their early stuff, especially mental thoughts, or what's called mental, and that one I can't pronounce.
Dysrhythmia.
That one, yes, those are very reminiscent to me. Steve Harvey and Cockney Rebel, which I love, and I think is better than what Split Enz was doing. But yeah, it's similar. I mean, I don't know. I wonder if they were influenced by that.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, because they were early 70s. Their albums were earlier.
So Matt is staying on the pop path, but going off the charts here a little bit, adding History Never Repeats by Split Enz to the playlist. Sheryl's choice this week is No Reply at All from the Genesis Abacab album, and then also Climax Blues Band, their second song to make our playlist, I Love You. So coming up, we got a special episode. We're going to look at Bob Marley. The music biopic about Bob Marley is out this year. Bob Marley passed away in 1981, so we will look at his career, specifically his American album releases from 1972 until his death in 1981. We also have a special episode down the road where we're going to look at some of the big AOR albums that were released in 1981, Journey's Escape, Foreigner 4, and the Get Lucky album by Loverboy. So that's just a couple of special episodes we've got coming up down the road. And we got a few more songs to fill out our playlist for 1981. We'll also hear from Mike, Sheryl's husband, who will pick his favorite song and album of the year. And Sheryl and I will also pick our favorite albums of the year. I don't have one yet. I thought Corroboree might be it, but I don't think it quite is going to make it as an album, whole album, even though its best songs are all absolutely killers. Likewise, Abacab I thought might be in the running. Doubt it. No. Excuse me. One album will...
Did you think Face Value might be in yours?
No.
Okay.
Right now, I think maybe The Police, Ghost in the Machine, might be the one. But that comes out later in the year, so we'll address that album when we get to it.
And that album actually is very similar to me as far as the Face Value and Abacab, where, well, mostly Abacab. I was thinking about that today, actually. And I was listening to it today, too, because it feels similar to me in the way that the singles are some of my favorite songs from that band. But the album as a whole really falls short for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a bunch of albums so far, and none of them have really locked down that favorite album position. I mean, there's contenders. I mean, I like The Who Face Dances a lot more than I did going in. Let's just say that.
Another one where the singles are amazing, but, as an album,
Van Halen's Fair Warning album, I still haven't quite absorbed that whole thing, but that's got a lot going for it as well.
It really does.
Psychedelic Furs, Talk, Talk, Talk. That's an album I need to listen to a little more. And then one I just listened to for the first time yesterday is Tom Petty's album from 1981, Hard Promises. Side one, at least. Very, very good.
Also, some of my favorite singles of his. The Waiting is probably my favorite song of his, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I still got a lot of work to do.
Probably one of my picks for song.
I'm going.
Yeah, you do. And I was like, I've already talked about an album that could have been my album of the year. It's a very, very close second. So I think I had a few more too that I probably could have possibly been in the running, but yeah. But I've got mine locked in though. I've got mine locked down.
So I still have a lot of work to do, if you could call it work. So it's the fun kind of work that we do to prepare for this show. Anyway, I'm going away for the weekend, so I'm going to take a bunch of 1981 music with me and explore further. And we'll get together again soon with our next episode of 1981 when we will talk all things Bob Marley. But until then, I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And you've been listening to Matt and Sheryl's GenExcellent playlist. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.